Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Integrated Math 2. In today's episode, we will be discussing which factoring method is best. Now, in the last week, I've shown you three different factoring methods, the first one being, and the primary one, being factoring by use of the area model. Now, in this one, we were using the idea of basically writing the area expressed as a sum and converting it into area expressed as a product, where you would see things get factored out literally, where you would have instead of something like x squared, area expressed as a sum, x squared plus 7x plus 12, through a use of a bunch of different tools, it would suddenly convert into x plus 3 times x plus 4, where this would either be your base or your height, and then this would be the other one, versus this would be the summation of all of the squares on the inside of the square that you saw. And so that was the first and primary model that we were using, and dominantly what I expected to see on the last quiz. But then we started introducing other methods. We started doing other methods where the next one was, and I'll go ahead and just do this one in blue here, factoring by use of grouping. Factoring by use of grouping, where again, what we did was we created a situation. We create a situation where we use a diamond to create a 4-part polynomial and factor by grouping. Unimaginatively, that is the name, right? Factoring by grouping, so we're going to factor by grouping. So if I was to use this exact same example here, you would get x squared plus 7x plus 12, and then through a little bit of hocus pocus, and I will show you guys what all this stuff is, you would end up in a situation, you would have a diamond here that you would have a bunch of numbers in, and then suddenly you would get x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 12, and then suddenly that, through a series of twists and turns, would get you exactly the same answer, x plus 3 times x plus 4. And so a little bit more steps, a little bit less steps involved than the area model, but still there's a little, it's involved, and we end up getting the same answer anyway, so it's all good. Okay, the last version of factoring that I showed you was factoring by guess and check. And what we were doing here is we were literally looking at the trinomial and guessing two numbers that primarily multiply to the last term. Secondly, will sum, or combine into the middle term. Now, this sum and combine into the middle term, there's a bit of a hitch with that, because when you start getting numbers that are different than 1 in front of the x squared, they won't sum up to the middle term. So that's why I emphasize that they primarily have to multiply to get to the last term, because they simply won't do that when you have a number that's bigger than 1 or other than 1. So from here, what you had, and again, I'm just going to use the same example, and again, we will get into more depth about this. We literally just went for it, where we said, okay, and again, in this case, because the number in front of the x squared is 1, we got two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 7 at the same time. It's x plus 3 and x plus 4. You just literally went for it. Now, guessing and checking was the method that I was taught when I was in school. So when I first started teaching, a little bit of history about me here. When I first started teaching, the grouping diamond became, that was the new hot thing. That was the new crystal clear Pepsi, and so that was the big thing. And eventually, people started to kind of like go back towards the guessing and checking, especially as factoring became just a small part of a large problem. And then recently, with the transfer into this CPM style of learning, we got into the area model because it turned out that that students were learning how to do area for a lot of different things. And so realistically, what the grouping does is it just basically puts it in a situation to where you can see it better. The area model is a really good graphic organizer for you to kind of keep yourself organized in what your thoughts are. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time talking about which method is best, or telling you the 3 things you can do to get really rich and get really fast at factoring without telling you anything, just because I want to suck up views and get you guys to subscribe and all that other nonsense. All I can tell you is that, and I will tell you this straight from the beginning, you are the only person who can determine which method is best for you. Okay, you are the only person who can determine that. And so I equate factoring to kind of like driving. The fastest way to a destination really is the directions that you know how, in terms of how you know how to get there. Having said that, I do believe there are things that are somewhat faster than the others, but as you guys are going to see, faster doesn't always necessarily mean better. And so, back when I first started teaching, I used to equate these methods with the cars in F-Zero, the old video game for the Super Nintendo, which is the design of the colors, where the factoring by use of the area model was good. This was almost like the Golden Fox, where the car was easier to control, but it plateaued. It ended up plateauing, and there's only so fast you can get with this car, in the game and in factoring. The Blue Falcon, which was in F-Zero, is also a good car. Its acceleration is really good, and it has a better top-end speed than the area model does, because at the end of the day, when you get used to the diamond, you can bypass the area and go straight for the grouping, which also emphasizes the GCF, and I'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of all of them as I go through. And then the factoring by guess and check, I believe, ultimately is the fastest thing, especially as you get more advanced. This was like the Fire Stingray from F-Zero, where it's not fast to begin with, because you really have to know your multiplication tables. And at the end of the day, once you get good at guessing and checking, your guesses get better and your checks get less frequent, and then you end up just guessing the right thing every single time, or at least, with a 97% average. And so again, this is just my opinion on it. It's really up to you. But I will go ahead and do 3 problems, and I'm going to do them all 3 ways, and then we'll summarize what each factoring method offers in terms of advantage and disadvantage. And then at the end of the day, you guys will just kind of make a decision, and then you'll go from there. So let's take a look at the problem. I'll just go ahead and do it in yellow every single time. So the first problem is y squared plus 6y plus 8. Okay, so if I'm going to do the area model, I'm going to go and just bust this out into a diamond first. And then again, the 8 is going to go up top, and the 6 is going to go on bottom. I'm going to go and figure out 2 numbers that multiply to 8 and add to 6 at the same time. It's going to be 4 and 2. What that does is it gives me pieces to put into this little window right here. So I'm going to go and put y squared, an 8, a 4y, and a 2y, right? Because that's where the 4 and the 2 come from. And then from here, I'm going to go and find out the dimensions of the pieces. So y squared is pretty easy. I'll go and bust them out into a y and a y. No question there, because y times y gives me the lower left box of y squared. Y times something is going to get me 4y. Well, that something is going to go down here, making it 4, because y times 4 gives me 4y. Same idea up here. Y times something gets me 2y. That something is a 2. So my area expressed as a sum can now be expressed as an area expressed as a product, which is going to be y plus 2 and y plus 4. And there you go. So again, a little bit on the procedural side, but it's okay. Nothing wrong with it. We can totally hang with that. Oops, not number 2. What am I saying? I'm going to do a different method. Next is going to be, I'm going to do it by grouping. Next. The grouping model utilizes the diamond in the exact same way the area model does. So again, I'll go 8, 6 here, and then 4 and 2. But where the grouping method diverges from the area model is these 2 numbers are now used to break apart the middle term. So if I rewrite this expression like this, the 6y becomes literally unadded, where I get plus 4y plus 2y and then plus 8. So again, I unadded the 6y. And I'll scroll down just a little bit here. Now I get back to my 4-part polynomial. So I group the front runner and the chaser. Sorry for all the car analogies here, but it seems to work. I factor out a GCF of y. I get y plus 4. And then from here, between the chasers, I get factoring out a 2 on GCF, leaving me with y plus 4. Now I have a 2-part expression, a binomial expression, whose GCF is y plus 4. So the GCF again here of the two-parter is y plus 4, leaving you with y plus 2. So the grouping method is still really good. Honestly, I feel like there are some advantages to this, where it's a strict procedure and it works. There are advantages to this, and again, when we summarize the advantages and disadvantages of all three, you'll see that there's actually a pretty strong advantage in the grouping model. There are aspects of it that I really like. And then guess and check. Guess and check. Realistically, again, you're just going to look for two numbers that multiply to 8 and add to 6. When you just go for it, it's just 2 and 4. Sorry, y plus 2, y plus 4. Again, I believe the winner in terms of speed is definitely going to be guess and check for this one. But again, that doesn't make it better than the other ones, because there's a lot of good emphasis in the grouping method on GCF, which is a heavy advantage when you get later on in math. And so anyway, so that's the first example, and this is a pretty easy example. On a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being easy, 3 being hard, this problem here is super simple. You know, the signs are both plus, there's a 1 in front of the y squared term, there's nothing hard about this. So honestly, you know, I guess I'll throw in my opinion. If I was to be asked to do this problem, I would lean towards guess and check because it's fast, and there's nothing really crazy about it. And again, like I said, I'm going to be biased. I'm just going to let you know right now, my bias is towards guessing and checking because that's what I was doing for a long time. But just because that's where I lean doesn't mean that that is the best thing at all. So let's do another example. I'll change colors. Okay, so we did the golden fox. Let's go ahead and do the blue falcon next. And again, the color, by the way, which I decided to do the problems, does not have anything to do with my bias towards them. It's just, you know, I want to switch up colors because, you know, variety is the spice of life. So here we go, 7x squared minus 30x plus 27. So we're getting a little more serious here. There's a number in front of the 7, or a number in front of the x squared. Luckily it's prime, and so there's, you know, and then plus, now we have a minus plus symbol happening here. So again, we'll go and do the area model. We'll go and start off with the area. The area starts off with the diamond, and 7 times 27 is actually kind of a large number. It's going to be 189. And the bottom number is going to be 30. This is where the area model gets kind of hard, and the grouping, because now you got to know two numbers that are going to multiply to 189 and add to negative 30. It turns out those two numbers are negative 21 and negative 9. And so what that does is, again, into the area model we go. It goes 7x squared and then 27. I'm going to go and throw the negative 21x up here and the negative 9x down here. It doesn't matter where I put these two boxes here, but what it does have consequences for is where I put my dimensions for my lower left-hand box. And so I really don't want to be doing that, because 7 times something ugly is going to get me negative 9. I don't want to go there. I think that 7 is best suited to go here because it lines up with the negative 21, and the x lines up here because, you know, anything can divide into 1. It's easy. So from here, I believe the terms are going to be, it looks like negative 9 and negative, careful, 3, because 7 times negative 3 would get me the negative 21. And here we go. The area expressed as a product would be 7x minus 9 and then x minus 3. So from here, you know, again, a little bit procedural, but it's not that bad. You know, again, the area model gives a very good visualization of what's going on. And especially if you've been trained in area since elementary school, this is the best control method that you're going to have. Let's go by grouping. Let's go by grouping next. So again, same thing. 189 and negative 30. Same numbers, negative 21, negative 9. And so I would say this becomes 7x squared minus 21x. Again, what am I doing? I'm breaking apart this negative 30. In fact, I'm going to write this down. It should be minus 30x plus 27. When I break this apart by grouping, I'll get 7x squared. This guy will break apart in a negative 21x minus 9x plus 27. Again, notice how if I combine those terms together, I will get back to negative 30. So it's like I'm unadding them. So from here, the grouping method comes into tow, where I group the front runner and the chaser, like always, factor out a 7x from the front runner, I get x minus 3, factor out a negative 9 from the chaser, I get x minus 3, and now I factored out two GCFs, and now I've got a two-part binomial, and now I factor out the GCF of the GCF. It's like the movie Inception, okay, where we're one layer down, we factor out again. At first, this would be the car falling off of the bridge. Now we're in the hotel room with the elevator. It's a good movie. You get a chance to watch it, but you don't need to watch it to understand what's going on here. So we just factored out an x minus 3, and we're back to exactly the same thing as we had before. Again, if you're confused, multiplication order doesn't matter, so it's not a huge deal. Okay, so from here, that was grouping. Now we're going to go straight for the go for it method, which is guessing and checking. This is going to require a little bit of work, where I'm going to go and just go for it right away, and I'll go and just reference this as my thing. And I already know the answer, so it's hard to really give validity to this, because you're going to be like, wait a second, you already know the answer, so it's not really a whole lot of guessing involved. But let me show you why this works. If I do 7x and x, one of the things you start to notice about when you do guessing and checking is that when the first term is negative and the last term is positive, it means that both terms are negative. And that's just, and that will happen because of the nature of how this multiplies out. In fact, I'm going to move my negative over here a little bit. And then what you want now, remember in the definition, I said that we're going to look for two numbers that primarily multiply to 27. Now, let's say, for example, I guessed wrong. I put a 3 here and a 9 here. Well, when I check, I'm going to get negative 63x, and I get negative 3x. There's no way these guys can combine out to become negative 30. So what I do is I swap the order, and I say, okay, maybe the order of the multiplication matters. Oops, just said I wasn't going to do that. And now when I check this guy, I get a negative 21x and I get a negative 9x. These dudes definitely combine out to become negative 30, and we're good as blue. So, you know, in terms of this one, I would say, again, and my bias is towards guessing and checking, partly because 189 is a pretty large number. And so I don't know if I would, in the middle of a timed test, if I could really think, oh my gosh, two numbers that multiply to positive 189 and add to negative 30, I don't know if I could do that. And so guessing and checking allows me to just break apart the 7x and the x. Also, you know, one of the things, again, I have to emphasize is that because 7 is prime, we get lucky. There's only one way to break apart 7x squared. It's just 7x and x. So that's what makes me lean towards guessing and checking here again. But, you know, a lot of you guys are better at multiplying than I am, and you guys see this faster than I do. So, so anyway, let's move on to the final example, and then we'll do a summarization. Let's clean up the board. Whoops, get you out of there. Get out. Make like a tree and get out of here. Okay, in the last example here, we've got number 3. Oops, I'll switch to the pink fire stingray. Let's switch to the 3. So 12x squared minus x minus 20. Okay, so now we're getting real serious, because this 12 here, unlike the 7 and unlike the 1, the guessing and checking can get a little bit daunting, because 12 can be broken up into a few different ways. 6-2, 4-3, and 12-1. So in fact, why don't I start with that method first? I'll just start with that. Now from here, if I look at the numbers, this idea of like the 1 leads me to believe that I'm probably dealing with 4 and 3. Okay. Now I don't know why I feel that, but I just kind of do. And so with the guessing and checking, and again, I'll start with that first. That way you guys aren't like, oh my gosh, he already knew the answer, so it's not really a whole lot of guessing involved. So here, if I do a 4x and a 3x here, one of the things that you guys are going to learn also if you start doing guessing and checking is that when the final term is negative, that means that one of the things is negative and the other thing is positive, but we don't know which one it is. So at this point, I just start guessing. I mean, two numbers that multiply to 20 are 4 and 5. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw the 4 down here and the 5 down here. I will now check my answer. This gets me 20x. This gets me 12x. There is no way that 20 and 12 can get me to negative 1. Now, before I even check, let me explain to you why this is a bad guess. It's because in this bubble right here, in this factorization here, the first one, notice how there's a 4 and a 4. If that was to be true, that means that there would have been a GCF of 4 in this bubble right here. But remember, we're not fundamentally changing this expression at all. We're just representing it differently, which means if there was a GCF of 4 in one of the factors, that means that there would have had to have been a GCF of 4 in the original expression. You look at that expression, I don't see any GCF at all. So that alone, and that requires that's probably, by the way, a really odd way of looking at it, and it's having to be able to see like 3 moves ahead of you. But after a while, like I said, guess and check relies heavily on experience. So you have to guess wrong like 5,000 times before you guess right like 400 times. So the 4 definitely doesn't go there. The 4 is going to go here, if anything, and the 5 is going to go here. Now, by the way, 5 and 4 could be totally wrong. I could end up with 10 and 2. All right? Now, again, let me explain why 10 and 2 probably wouldn't be good. Because if I put a 10 here and a 2 here, again, I see another GCF of 2. But there was never a GCF of 2 here, and same thing if I put a 2 here. Another GCF of 2, never a GCF of 2. So actually, 10 and 2, we can slice that thing out of our guesses right away. So it requires a little bit of number sense, but eventually you kind of get used to it. And so I apologize for that long-winded rampage right there. My guess is 5 here and 4 here. Let's check it out. 16x and 15x. Dude, those can totally combine out to become a negative 1 if the 16 was negative, meaning this guy's negative, this guy's positive. This is my factorization of that expression right there. So that's the guessing and checking way of doing it. And again, it requires a lot of like thinking and being wrong and being okay with being wrong, because you're going to guess wrong. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. The grouping method might be where you want to go with this. Negative 20 times 12 is negative 240. And then you get negative 1 down here. Now I know that I just said that 189 in the last example is really high and it's hard to understand. But actually 240 is a lot easier to understand from 189 because it's, it ends in a 0. So you could say that it's, 15 and negative 16. And actually what's funny is that the guess and check model kind of models that a little bit. And so from here you group it. So you get 12x squared plus 15x minus 16x minus 20. Group them, and you get, looks like if we factor out from here, looks like a 3x. We'll get a 4x plus 5, and then factor out a negative 4 here, and then we get 4x plus 5. So then we factor out a 4x plus 5 because that is the GCF of the GCF, and we're back to where we started with guessing and checking. And then, of course, the area model, you guys know the ending of this movie, where it's the same idea, negative 240, negative 16, and 15, and negative 1. But this time we would utilize that in a box, and we would get 12x squared, negative 20. This would be, negative 16 going down here and 15 here. Again, it doesn't matter where I put the insides. It's the dimensions that are going to play a role. So I would have to put the 4x here and the 3x here, and then minus 4, and then plus 5. And then you get the same thing. 3x minus 4, 4x plus 5. So those are the 3 examples. I just did them 3 times just to show you that all 3 work. So again, let's just go and summarize this. Let's go and summarize which factoring method is best here. So which is best? It's, again, like I said at the very beginning of the video, it's hard to lock it down. Which method is best? I'll go with a nice neutral color, maybe gray. Does that show up? It kind of does. I'll go with yellow. It just depends. So let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each one. So with area, the advantages of area. The area advantages are that it's visual. It is very, very visual. If you've been trained in finding area and are comfortable, from what I understand in elementary school, they get you started with area very early and are comfortable with it. It's a good, safe method. Right? And some of us are very visual learners, and sometimes that's why math can get hard, is because sometimes it doesn't get we don't always see it visually, and so so sometimes the area model is just a great visual graphic organizer for you. The disadvantages are that after a while it can become a little bit slow. It's a bit procedural and kind of slow. Depends, and it can only move as fast as you can. I believe there is an upper limit on how fast you can go with the area model because you're drawing 2 diagrams and just getting it done. So, and also it takes up space. It takes up space. And so, eventually you'll be in integrated 3, you'll be dealing with, maybe 4 different factorings in one problem. And if you're doing 4 different area models, it's going to take a little while. So, it's, it's right there for you, the advantages and disadvantages. Let's talk about the grouping. The grouping advantages. The grouping advantages are, it heavily emphasizes GCF, and that actually is the greatest advantage of the grouping method, and this is why I like it the most. If you're good at grouping, then you're really good at identifying GCF, and you guys have seen we've been doing those really hard GCFs in class where the GCF is like a binomial or a square root. Factoring by grouping really helps emphasize the idea that a GCF doesn't have to be a singular term. It doesn't have to just be like 4x or 3x squared. It can be like x minus 2 to the 4th. It can be the square root of x squared plus 1. GCF is just whatever they have in common. It heavily emphasizes GCF, and it's a solid procedure for factoring. And it works. It works, and not that the area model doesn't work, but the grouping, it works every single time. And factoring by grouping is its own technique. So you can just use that technique. It's almost like almost a one size fits all. Like a tire iron. A tire iron is a great all-purpose tool. You can use it to kind of well, I won't talk about what you can use a tire iron for, but it's a good all-purpose tool. And so grouping disadvantages. Grouping disadvantages, oops, whoa. Okay, I didn't realize that those were grouped together. Give me a second. Let me just move this dude back so that he's kind of in line like that. Good job. All right, here we go. Grouping disadvantages. The grouping disadvantages are, it can get a little bit tedious. It can be a bit slow, especially if you already know what the factor is going to be. So if you already know what the factors are going to be, and you're like, I am hell bent, I got to do the grouping. You can't. You can just kind of go for it. So it can be a bit slow. It's definitely faster than the area model. And again, this is just my opinion. So someone could just come in and say, you're wrong about everything, and that's fine. Okay, and then the guess and check. The guess and check advantages. I believe that with guess and check, in the end, it is the fastest one, the fastest method. In the end. And so as your guesses get better, you become faster. And so, but like I said, faster doesn't always mean better. So the guess and check disadvantages are if you're weak in multiplication in multiplication, it is hard because you have to know 2 numbers that multiply to the end and add to the middle. That can get really, really weird. And then sometimes you're just wrong. And like all things, after a while, like I kept talking about, you kind of go with your instincts, and your instincts are good. But sometimes, as I learn regularly, that sometimes your instincts are just wrong, and you guess wrong, and sometimes you have to just keep guessing, and that can get demoralizing if you keep guessing wrong. And sometimes when you have non-prime numbers, guessing and checking can be tedious. And so those are just kind of the advantages and disadvantages of each one, in my opinion. And so at the end of the day, which factoring method is best? I can't answer that for you. Only you can answer that for yourself. But just because, there are 3 different methods, please don't feel like you have to use one all the time. Like in Super Smash Brothers, we don't always main the same character. So, like I used Falco and Fox, and then sometimes I use Marth. It's okay. And sometimes the grouping has its advantages over guess and check, but sometimes the problem is just so fast you can just guess and check it right away. So don't feel like you're locked into to just one method. One of the things that we're trying to show you in this class is that, especially when it comes to factoring, which I believe is the most important thing in the class, having many weapons available to you to take down these problems as fast as possible is always the best advantage you could have. So I hope you guys found this informative. And yeah, I will, as always, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments or send them to me by email or whatnot. You guys know how to communicate with me. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next episode.